Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of Stop Complaining, Work Harder. I'm Carey Davis with a face for radio right here in the Work Harder Studios, a 60-year-old RV that seems to work very well for this sort of thing. I want to thank everybody if you've tuned in thus far and watched all the other 6 episodes. Hopefully you're getting something out of this. If you haven't watched them, please pause this, go back, watch the first 6. I really hope I can impart some of the hard-won wisdom that I've got. And by hard-won, I mean it was 25 years of managing some fun people who really helped out a lot. Some of them, sometimes it was painful, but most of the time it was great. So I just retired from the U.S. government, working at both Department of Justice with the INS, DHS with CBP, and DOT with PHMSA, the Pipeline and Hazardous Material Safety Administration, which I'm sure some of you have probably heard about, but not many, because it's a very small agency with a very big job. So 33 years with the government, 25 of those I was a manager, from everything from a first-line supervisor all the way up to the C-suite in Washington, D.C. for several years. So I've worked all around the world as a customs attaché, as a director of international operations for CBP, you name it. I've had a lot of experience by any standard, and I'm really happy to share the benefit of my experience, both good and bad, with you. Hopefully you can mold your vision and your leadership directives and policies to avoid some of the pitfalls I ran into. And this is episode 7, so we're going to get right into it. First, I want to talk about why did you become a supervisor? So, and if you haven't become a supervisor yet, or you're not a government employee or whatever, this to me holds a lot of interest, because it's kind of a theory I came up with many years ago, after asking myself, what the hell did I get involved in this for? And you will. If you're a manager of any kind, there's going to come a point where you start questioning, why did I do this? The extra $100 every 2 weeks in my paycheck does not make it worthwhile. And that's what it'll come down to. Make more money. It's never enough. And I'm all about making more money. I'm a big fan of that. But it'll never be enough to make it worthwhile, the headaches you've now taken on. Because they only increase. The further up the chain you go, it never gets easier. There's a reason your boss makes more money than you do. His job is or her job, whoever's job, is harder than yours. I promise you, it doesn't matter where you're at. Your boss's job is going to be more complex, more difficult, likely more stressful. And, so you got to say, why? Why did I do this? What's my purpose here? Why am I doing this? And something I learned, not everyone is cut out to be a supervisor. I got great advice when I was wanting to be a supervisor, because I wanted that promotion back in the INS days when the journeyman was a GS9, and I just wanted that 11 to be a first-line supervisor, and it was a big deal. And I remember I went to a great man, Fred Sprickman, one of the greatest supervisors I ever worked with, and I said, Fred, I want to be a supervisor. And Fred said, I don't think you're ready. And Fred had been a supervisor for 30-something years at the time, so he knew what he was talking about. And I was maybe 27, 28 years old, and I did not know what I was talking about. And I said, what do you mean? I took it as an insult. What do you mean I'm not ready? I'm fantastic at this job. I'm obviously ready. What I didn't realize is that knowing a job, knowing your work job, means jack when it comes to being a supervisor. It's a skill set you have to learn. It's a whole art, and it's a whole discipline. And Fred understood this very well, because he'd been doing it since I was in high school or maybe even elementary school. And I said, well, how dare you say that? He's like, no, it's true. You're not ready. You need some maturity on you and some time. He wasn't wrong. Absolutely was not wrong. About a year and a half later, when I went into supervision and learned that I wasn't ready. My first year as a manager was awful, because I simply was unprepared and all the training in the world couldn't fix it. And, I keep talking about, everyone, as I said, government training is really piss poor for managers. So my first management job was with detention and deportation with the INS, and I was the chief of detention. I was a GS-11 in charge of about 60 officers, about 600 inmates, $15 million budget. Wholly unprepared for this. Wholly and totally unprepared. I was not ready for that job. Had an ultra demanding boss. It was not a job to be taken lightly. Very serious fleet of about 75 vehicles all over the Southeast. I was just simply unprepared. And my boss, who was not a great supervisor, but I learned a lot from him. And you can learn just as much from bad managers as you can from good managers. But he came to me when I got hired. He said, "You've got a year's probation as a manager." So in the government, when you first get hired as a supervisor, you're on probation for your first year. And in that year, you will go to basic supervision, which was, of course, the INS gave, and advanced supervision. And I didn't even know they had advanced supervision because no one I knew had ever been to it. Well, I found out why. So basic supervision was a course in how to deal with the union that wasn't that great, but it taught you nothing about being a supervisor. I guess dealing with the union is one small element of supervision. Knowing the CBA, the collective bargaining agreement with the union, is the big thing. And that's what they didn't teach. All they taught was how to talk to people, which you learn that good and bad one way or the other. I talk about it in this series all the time. But I'll say it again. I said it in one other episode. But if you have a bargaining unit, a union, learn your collective bargaining agreement, the CBA. Know it backwards and forwards. They certainly do. And if you don't, they will beat you over the head with it. So, that said, that was basic training. Advanced training was a retirement seminar. And the reason I didn't know anybody that had ever gone to advanced training was people waited till a couple of months before they retired, took the training because it was a retirement seminar, and then retired. And so it was worthless to me. And so I came back to this chaotic, broken shop that I was wholly unprepared to deal with. And I spent about a year trying to figure it out. And I was terrible. I probably made it worse. One of the things the INS did, and the INS went away inglamorously, back in 2003. And a lot of people didn't like it. A lot of people have complaints of certain things I thought were run very poorly. Other things were run very well. One of the things that was a really great idea that Customs does not do, CBP does not do, actually DOT didn't do it either, was we had a specific management official who was the assistant district director for management in the INS. And the one in Atlanta, at the last few years of the INS was fantastic. And so when I had problems, I would go to the assistant district director for management and say, "How the hell do I fix this?" And he would sit down and guide me through the steps. He couldn't tell me what to say, but he could sit there and say, "Okay, in order to terminate someone, these are the steps you must take." And when I followed his steps, everything worked perfectly. I thought that was one of the best ideas, and I encourage any senior manager in the government to think about that. Have a senior management official available. Even if you don't have to create a spot for it, designate someone. Designate the person. Hey, you can go to this guy. He's not your boss. You go to this guy, and he can guide you through management procedures. And that's true of at all levels. Senior executives need that help, just like first-line supervisors need that help. It's a rare supervisor in the government that's ever actually, termination's a great example. It's a rare supervisor in the government that a manager's ever had to fire someone because it's so hard to do. Most people give up on the idea. I'm telling you right now, don't do that. If you need to terminate someone, buckle down, do the bureaucracy, get through the steps, knock it out, because it's what needs to be done. Not just for you, not just for the employee who needs to go. If they don't need to be there, they don't need to be there. But for the agency and for the country. They don't need people like that in the civil service. There's too many already. There's too many people in the U.S. government should have been fired, but weren't. And again, this is not a political show, but I can tell you right now, Doge got rid of the wrong people. At least from what I saw. Doge encouraged the wrong people to leave. That's me, my opinion. Treat it how you expect. Anyways, all this is to go back to, why did I become a supervisor? So I'm telling you, this was the training I received. And I received no more training for another 9 years until I was an upper mid-level manager, until I was a GS-14. And I went through all that time with no training. I just had to learn it. So that's why when I talk about learn from my experience, listen to what I say, and maybe if I talk about 100 things, maybe one of them helps you. Maybe. Then it's all worth it. If I can do that for one person, then all of this time I'm spending will be worth it. So, that said, you say, well, why would you do this? Because it's not that much more money. Not that more. The biggest jump in salary I ever got was going from a 9 to an 11, because I didn't become a supervisor when I got my 11. It was another job that required a lot of overtime, and so I got a big step on that. But then from a 13 to a 14 was a big increase. Other than that, you're talking about $100, $200 a paycheck, which I'm not. Hey, nothing to sniff at. Don't turn it away. But the point is, it wasn't enough money to make up for the headache. So why? And what I've come to realize over the years is supervision isn't a job, it's a calling. You have to want to be a supervisor to be a good one. You can become a supervisor, but if you don't want to be a supervisor, you're never going to be a good supervisor. So you need to decide that. So my suggestion, if anyone who's ever watches this who hasn't become a supervisor yet, hasn't made that leap in their journey, is to go to your boss. And remember last episode we talked about leading up. It's okay to ask for things. Go to your boss and ask them to be an acting supervisor. Now, if you're in a unionized environment, there might already be a plan. You may have to do some seniority thing and wait till you have the opportunity. But go and ask. Tell them you're interested. I'd like to see what this is like. And maybe you can get a 90 or 120-day detail, acting as a manager. When I was the port director in Atlanta, I had an agreement with my union president, and I kept 3, sometimes 4 supervisor slots open all the time. And we had 500 employees, so we could do this. And then by seniority, the people that wanted to become an acting supervisor would become an acting supervisor. And this let them see what it was like. They even got to experience losing friends, which is great, because that's the first thing that happens when you get promoted and become a manager, is you find out who your actual friends are. Because the ones that aren't suddenly don't like you. They're not your friend. You'll figure that out. So, they get to see what it's like. They get to decide kind of if it's for them. They get a taste of it. But where it really helps is you as the manager, because then when that first line supervisor position does open up and gets announced, you have far fewer people apply. And the people who do apply really, really want it instead of wanting the money. Because the people who think, boy, if I can just get that 12 or just get that 13, that'll make all the difference. And they get the first paycheck and they say, what? Taxes ate most of it up. That's what happens. So, it is a calling. Some people are great supervisors out of the box. Some people are awful and they grow into the job. Some people have the capacity to learn, and some people just hate it. The stress and dealing with other human beings is so oppressive. And if you're one of those people, and I know I've encouraged a few people that have become supervisors who down the road realized that it was not for them. And, if any of you guys are watching this, then you know who you are. I'm sorry. But, I thought it was for you. It wasn't. And those people, as far as I know, were had the mental capacity to say, you know what, this isn't working. And they went back to being a journeyman, and they're happy. And that's what matters, because, and then when people say money can't buy happiness, go without it for a little while. We'll see if that holds true. But a little bit extra money for a lot of stress sometimes does not equal happiness. And so if you're unhappy, sometimes that'll translate into your personal life, and you don't want that. You don't want the stress to cause you health problems. If you can't or don't want to be a supervisor, please, please, please go tell your boss and take a downgrade. You won't lose any money if you've been doing the job 90 days. They're going to give you the steps, and you're in a much better situation. But get out and let someone have the opportunity who does. This isn't to downplay it. This isn't to discourage people. Not everybody wants to do this. It's not for everybody. It's something that's got to be in you. So that's my best talk about that. I'm going to put my email address up as I do at the end of every episode, and you guys can contact me and tell me I'm full of crap, or that I'm wrong, or whatever you want to say. I'm happy to have those conversations with you. So let's get to today's main topic, and it's something I learned when I went to the University of Chicago, and it's held true almost universally everywhere I've been, and I've managed since that was in 2011. Since then, I've managed 8-9 different groups, large and small. As small as 5, or it's actually as small as 0, and as large as 500. So, and you can. So one of the tricks to being a good manager, and this is definitely management, is to step back and assess your group, not the individuals, the group. What skills do they have? What's their composition? How are they working? How does the workflow work? All this sort of thing. And the rule is that any group, any work unit, group, agency, 20% of your employees are going to be high performers. They're going to be outstanding, exceeds. They are going to, whatever the goal is, they will well exceed that goal. And you don't have to manage them. You don't have to supervise them. You wind them up and let them go, and they're going to rattle down the street and take care of business, and it's going to be fantastic. And then 60% of that group are going to come in and do their job every day. They're going to hit that mark. That's about all you can expect for them, but they're doing their job. Can't be upset about that. They're fantastic because they come in every day, they do the work, go home. What are you going to do? That's it. And then there's that lower 20%. And that last 20% isn't doing their job. And they're dragging their feet. They're not making their mark. They're underperforming or not performing at all. In the case of the government, they're usually hiding somewhere. I've used the term before in this, but they're oxygen thieves. They are people who are taking the wind out of the operation, and they're like a boat anchor dragging it around. So I remember when I was taught this rule, it was at the University of Chicago, and they had a senior advisor for a big CEO of a Fortune 500 company come in and tell us, and this individual's telling us this rule, and I found it very intriguing. But then she said, well, and in our company, we terminate the lower 20% every year, and we encourage you to do that too. And so this is a bunch of government employees in there, and there was a supervisory border patrol agent who raised his hand. He goes, "Ma'am, you're aware we work for the U.S. government. We can't fire anybody." And the whole room went quiet for a second, and then erupted in laughter, because it's, only jokes are only funny when they're true or based in the truth, and there's a lot of truth to that. And then she said something that I found interesting. She says, "Well, if you can't terminate them, marginalize them, get them out of your operation." She was deadly serious with this person. She said, take the dead weight and get it away from the people who perform, because underperformance, non-performance is like a cancer. It will come it will infiltrate the group and get into the group and create that 20% that's underperformed to become 30, 35, 40%. You don't want this. This is how organizations die from within. And so I've watched, and every time I walk into a new situation, I went to 4 or 5 places over the course of my career where I would walk into a broken shop and have to deal with that. And this 20, 60, 20, more or less, you can get down to percentages, but more or less it was true everywhere you went. And the cancer theory, how the poor performers infect regular performers, that's absolutely held sway. And what happens is, as that cancer grows, the upper 20%, your overperformers, will start to say to themselves, what the hell am I doing here? Why am I working so hard? And that's when the boat will capsize. That's when everything goes to hell. As soon as your top performers start questioning their purpose, that's when it's too late at that point. It's time to reorganize. Once you see that, it's time to reorganize. So how do you put this into practice? How do you recognize that lower 20%? Well, the first thing you do is watch. And I've said this before. This is how you learn. This and this is how you learn. Not with this. If you're talking like I'm doing now, you're not learning. You watch and you listen. Watch your troops. This is supervision. Watch your troops. Watch the staff, how they interact, who's doing what. You will have people come to you and rat the underperformers out. Whether you think they're coming to you or not, it may be in casual conversation. When you do your rounds, and every manager does this, you're going to go around to the guys and try to be one of the guys and listen to them, and they're going to start talking shit about their colleagues. I promise you, it's going to happen. And you don't say anything. You watch and you listen. And you remember. You go through this, and then maybe you start watching that person. And you watch their performance. Not their numbers, not their stats, but what do they do during the day? What do they do during this? So in the Port of Atlanta, in Concourse E, where we worked most of the time, I was a manager there, the supervisor offices were on one side of this incredibly large arrivals hall. It's a room the size of 2 football fields put together. It's huge. For many, many years, till they built Terminal 5 in London, I think it was the largest international arrivals hall in the world. On the other side of that are some offices and a break room. I knew, because I had been a journeyman, so I knew what my colleagues were up to, that the Oxygen Thieves hid in that break room as long as they could. Because when Delta flights would arrive and that room would fill up, and we would literally fill it up beyond fire capacity every day, we would all have to go out and start inspecting people, stamping passports, asking people why they were coming to the U.S., making determinations, So I'm out there working, and there's 3,000 people in the room, and I know there's 3 or 4 guys sitting back in that break room drinking coffee and laughing. Oxygen thieves. They're stealing my air. So, watch. As the manager, you watch. You listen. Okay, these people are probably back in that break room on the other side, or whatever equivalent your office has. Every office has one, or more. Delta, there's a place in your baggage control room that has a bunch of old spools that guys go to smoke cigarettes and hang around and avoid work. If you don't know, underneath Concourse E, just let you know. So, anyways. So you watch and you find a few of the people. You're only going to find a few because most of them are really good at hiding from you. That their profession is not the job. Their profession is hiding and getting paid. And so you find a few, and then you watch them and watch the people they associate with. Because one of the best things I ever learned was the phrase "trash gathers." And it will. Oxygen thieves associate with other oxygen thieves, and they recognize each other even when they don't know each other. So when you get a new crop of employees in, and in the government it comes in waves, you'll get 5 new guys, 30 new guys, 50 new guys. Depends on the size and scope of your organization. When the next wave of new employees comes in, you know who your oxygen thieves are. Watch the new people and see who befriends the oxygen thieves and hangs around with them. That's your next generation of oxygen thieves, because they recognize, they have this ability. And you may never know the full extent of the 20%, but you'll be able to recognize who they are, who a majority of them are. And then you figure out, and I don't think marginalizing is a good idea, frankly, as far as I'm concerned. If they're underperforming, and you work for the government, you obviously have to follow steps to deal with the underperformance. But it will give you an idea of who to look at and where to focus your efforts on recognizing the underperformance and attempting to raise their performance. If that's individual counseling, if that's performance work plans, termination, whatever it leads to, And you have to, government manager, you have to go through all these steps, and it's awful. If you're going to terminate someone, expect 6 months to a year, and then possibly repercussions of appeals and court time after that. That's business. That's your job. Do not shy away from it. When it's necessary, do it. Do not hesitate. Do it. Go to HR, get the ball rolling. They're going to tell you can't do it. You keep hammering them, and you document. Document every time you go to HR and they tell you no. Document it. Because at some point, one of these oxygen thieves is going to do something really stupid. Really, really, really stupid. And they're going to come to you and say, you're that person's supervisor. Why didn't you recognize it? Why didn't you do something about it? Why didn't you report it? What's going on here? And you need to be able to pull that documentation out and say, I went to HR this many times. And I told them about it. And they said no. And here's what happened. And if you don't think that that's necessary, you'll find out. You'll find out the hard way. So I'll talk more about this later, but I'm telling you right now, contemporaneous notes. It just reminded me I'm gonna do a whole segment on it, but contemporaneous notes are notes that you as a manager write down that are admissible both in criminal and civil proceedings. That means you can use it as evidence in court. And sometimes, if it only happens once in your life, it was worth it. I used to keep a manila envelope in my desk drawer, and it just said problems. And then anytime I would have an issue, like I went to HR and they said no, or some employee started yelling at me, or two employees got into a heated argument, I would write it down in my hand and date it, and stuff that little piece of paper. Even if it was a sticky note, I would stuff that piece of paper into the envelope called problems. Because at some point, people who act that way are going to get into real trouble. And when they get into real trouble, I promise you, the first thing the big bosses do is look for someone to blame, and the people they want to blame is going to be you. And so you pull that note right out and say, nope, here's my contemporaneous notes, where I went and I tried to effectively handle this, and HR, counsel, whoever it was, said no, I didn't have enough. Here it is. Document. You'll hear that a lot. With that, we'll end on a quick bullshit bingo. I've already gone a little long in this segment, which is funny because I thought I would go short. Today's word is collaborate. Collaborate simply means working with. I'm gonna collaborate with DEA on this. You mean you're gonna work with them? You're gonna talk to them? You're gonna bring them into your project? What are you doing? Do you go home to your family and tell your kids, I'm gonna collaborate with your mommy on television tonight? Is that what you say? No, it's not. This is not how normal human beings talk. Stop using these garbage words. Anyways, with that, thanks for tuning in. I'm Carey Davis. This is Stop Complaining, Work Harder from the Work Harder Studios. Thanks. Hit smash, like, whatever you got to do, the bell kettle things. Refer this show to your friends. Pass it around. Like I said, I just want to help people. Nothing I'm saying here affects your agency's policies. This is just a discussion about management. Email me if you have comments, if you want to be on the show. If you know somebody who ought to be on the show, send me a message. ctd@whiskeyandguns.com. I'll see you next time. All the best.